Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the final part of Let's Play Clue. Today we're moving on to the final case, which is this one right here. I cannot pronounce the name of it, but whatever this case may be, I'm pretty sure we're going to get this done as soon as possible. So, I'm going to choose purple for this last case because purple is my favorite color. Gotta make sure the difficulty is in novice for a reason, and here we go.
Mr. Body was lucky to survive his car crash, although he was sure that there was more than luck involved. When he came back from hospital, he told us that everything had changed. A new life was about to begin for him and for Arlington Hall. He was going to give up everything to lead the simple life, or so he would have us believe. And no one else had been offered the choice between the way things were and the sweetness and light that Mr. Body seemed so suddenly to have found. And someone didn't believe in it, did they? Because poor Mr. Body went to his reward a bit sooner than he expected.
Okay, I was busy making a Christmas card for one of my family members and friends, which I'm not going to say specifically who, but right now we're going to move on to this game.
Wrench. Fingerprints, Mrs. White and Professor Plum.
So two suspects hold this weapon. And if we go here, there's another evidence.
A live bullet. Fingerprints, Colonel Mustard.
And we have a cutscene here.
How much more time do you want, Professor?
We're going to talk to Mrs. White about the wrench.
Yes. I got it for Professor Plum. He wanted it to do something with the outside drain. Later, when we were in the hall, I suggested he use it to kill Mr. Green. But I only said it to stop him going on.
Okay, let's give the full summary for her.
I've been with Mr. Body for a long time, and I know all his tricks. I didn't believe for 1 minute that he was serious about these brothers. It was some sort of game, but he was playing with real people. I knew that Mr. Body had a letter about some of the antiques, and I wanted to get my hands on it. He had it with him in the billiard room. He was talking to the Colonel, and a very peculiar conversation it was too. It seemed to be about gambling, but I couldn't make any sense of it. Anyway, I thought he'd have put the letter in the safe. So I took the key from the hollowed-out book in the library and went to open the safe in the dining room. That's the last thing I remember.
Alright, let's go back to the mansion. And we gotta be careful not to use up these bells, because I don't know anything about... Because in the last part, I lose one of them. And I don't know if it's because I've been using the secret passage too much. So I gotta be very careful. So, let's go ahead and move on to this way towards the study. I have to say that someone should make a game like this. Someone should make a clue game like this. Because with the point-and-click aspects, along with the gameplay of the board game or so forth, makes it very interesting.
A drawer forced. Empty bullet box inside. Fingerprints, Mrs. White. Rope.
Okay, we got the rope, and there's something down here.
Blood on floor. Tests show blood to be Mr. Body's.
So there's blood on the floor, and it belongs to Mr. Body's. I wonder what happened. Anyway, here's a cutscene over here.
Who's there? Come on, Lionel!
It appears that Mrs. Peacock is trying to end Mr. Body right away with the dagger, but fortunately he caught her, even in the dark. I'm definitely going to use the secret passage for the time being, mainly because I don't want this game to crash. Because when I try to go through the door instead of the secret passage, it just, you know. Anyway, we got Professor Plum and Mr. Green in the kitchen.
Bin. Smashed cup with cloth. Stain on cloth. Tests show stain to be coffee and blood. The blood cannot be identified.
Uh-oh. I wonder what happened. I wonder what happened. There's nothing in the table. So let's talk to Professor Plum about the wrench, because he's another suspect that holds that weapon. The only two weapons that I found so far is the rope and the wrench, but no one uses the rope for some reason, because there's no fingerprints.
Yes, I spent an unpleasant hour with it, when I allowed myself to be talked into unblocking one of Body's neglected drains. Mrs. White found it for me. Later on, she gave it to me again, but for another purpose. I left it in the hall.
Alright, explain yourself.
They called it blackmail, you know. Mr. Green and Mrs. White, I mean. I'd found out that they were stealing antiques, and I agreed not to say anything, because of Mrs. White. Then Green started paying me to keep quiet, as he put it. But I never thought of it as blackmail. I have long since learned to make allowances for people's behavior, Green and Mrs. White included. But Miss Scarlet tested even my tolerance. I was watching her from the door to the lounge, and I could clearly see her putting a thoroughly evil-looking knife in the log basket. How can she explain that?
Interesting. Oh! It's added to the thing. Oh my goodness. So apparently Professor Plum probably saw Miss Scarlet near the fireplace with the dagger. Don't know why, but it appears that she's doing something right now. Oh, wait a minute.
Small fragments of smashed cup. A stain on the floor. Tests show stain to be coffee.
Mm-hmm. Then we got a cutscene in the kitchen.
There's no point in asking Mr. Body anything. That's one leopard who hasn't changed his spots.
That's the scene where Green and Mrs. White were talking at some point. Alright, so let's see here. Where do we go? I'm trying to get my cursor to go this way, but for some reason it's just, you know. Playing this on Windows mode, in other words, non-full screen mode, it's just a complete pain. But I really do love this game so far. Let's see what this room leads to. Oh, we got the ballroom.
A pen under the chair. It belongs to Mr. Green.
So the pen belongs to Mr. Green, hey? Interesting. And we got a cutscene here.
Take it! Go on! Get away from me! Take it away!
Mrs. White is going to talk, and when she does, we're both in the dock. So unless you want to explain all this to the judge... No.
I'm not going to do it! Look!
I'll make sure your little blackmail racket comes out into the open. And my friends from London will be coming to see you, Professor. But if I'm in jail, there'd be nothing I could do to stop them, would there? They don't like blackmailers.
What will they do to me?
I think you'd be better off if the police did lock you up. There. Good boy. Go and deal with Body. It's your only chance.
No! Take it away! Take it away! I can't do it! I can't do it!
Oh! Uh-oh. It looks like Professor Plum is bleeding due to the gunshot. But why on earth would Mr. Green want Professor Plum to deal with Mr. Botti? Anyway, here's the bloodstain.
Bloodstains. Tests show blood to be Professor Plum's.
Which confirms that it's not part of the crime scene here. If I see anything that is flashing, it means that there's something that I need to check. Okay, what I need to do is to go this way because I believe there's another room that I need to go to in this blue hall, which is not the actual hall for one of the rooms. This is just a way to navigate. Oh, look what we have here. We have Scarlet.
A glass and stain on the floor. Tests show stain to be wine. Fingerprints on glass, Mrs. Peacock.
Something must have happened there that made Mrs. Peacock drop the glass.
Both candlesticks. Fingerprints, Mr. Green.
Mr. Green has the candlestick, hey? Here's a cutscene.
If you want to drink while Rome burns, that's fine, but count me out.
Oh, don't be so childish. If we don't work together, we don't stand a chance. And you know it.
You really do have a nerve. Who introduced Uncle Body to this brother Jerome and his henchmen?
I can assure you I didn't do it to cut my own throat, even though that is exactly what happened.
You were always creeping around him, trying to get your hands on him and his money. You can sneer at me as much as you like, but I'm losing Arlington Hall and my inheritance.
You are losing everything because you borrowed from loan sharks against your inheritance. Oh, yes, didn't you know your uncle knew that?
It appears that she slapped the crap out of Mrs. Peacock, but she only hit her hand with the wine glass. Apparently, it's something to do with Miss Scarlet's inheritance, that she is used for a gambling debt, and her uncle knew about it. And I'm guessing that Miss Scarlet tried to slap her for it because she knew and probably told her, or told him, I don't know. Do. I don't know why I'm doing this.
I'm sure you're aware that this house is riddled with secret passages. Well,
Sometimes they can be very useful. I hid in the entrance to the one which leads into the study earlier in the day. Mrs. Peacock was there. She had that ugly knife of Uncle Boddy's. I couldn't see what she was doing properly, but then Uncle came in. There was a bit of a scuffle, and he cut his hand. After all the fuss died down, I'm afraid that I took the knife. I don't know what I intended doing with it. In fact, I got rid of it very quickly. But for a moment I thought I might actually be able to kill Uncle Boddy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, it's time to go back to the mansion. But I do have a feeling I know who did it. And it's way too obvious. It is way too obvious. But technically I know which room, and I also know who did it. I know who did it, and I know which weapon. I know exactly who did it. And this is going to be a very, short part of this LP, because I'm not going to make it too long due to the storage of this laptop here. I know exactly who did it, but I also know exactly where it happened. But first, I need to talk to Mr. Green.
I have to admit immediately that I am guilty of stealing Boddy's antiques and forging his signature. But murder is quite beyond me. Boddy wasn't interested in his antiques anyway, and nobody would have ever known what we'd been doing if he hadn't decided to get these brothers involved. Now, Mrs. Peacock. There's a lady who's capable of anything. She'd already had one fight with Boddy this weekend. I heard them shouting in the study earlier. Boddy told her to get out. She stormed out looking furious, and I couldn't resist looking into the study. Boddy was wrapping a blood-soaked handkerchief around his hand. Goodness knows what had been going on.
It appears that Mrs. Peacock may have injured him, but I know exactly who did it. I know exactly who did it. But first, let me see here. We're going to ask Mrs. White about the weapon.
I saw someone in the library, and I'm not saying who, pulling some books out of the bookcase. I thought I mean, the person was trying to find a book to read, but then that person put something in at the back of the bookcase. It looked like a gun to me.
Well, it looks like Mrs. White almost spilled something, and by spilled, I don't mean like spilling drinks. But I do have a feeling that she almost spilled the info of what really happened, or who really had the weapon and stuff. But because let's go back to the kitchen, because I have a feeling I know who did it. And it is not Mrs. Peacock. She tried but failed. I just hope it's worth it.
You think the murder took place in the kitchen? But who was the murderer?
It was Mrs. White.
Which weapon do you think they used?
The only weapon that is missing is the, what is it? The only weapon that is missing right now is the lead pipe. But it's actually this one.
And this is your accusation? You think the murderer was Mrs. White, in the kitchen, with the gun?
Congratulations, you've got it all right. Let's go back and have a look at it step by step and see how it happened.
Okay.
More than one person in the house was terrified that Mr. Body had discovered they'd been stealing his antiques for some time, but only Mrs. White had the guts to do anything about it. She found her weapon by pure chance. She knew the professor had hidden something behind the books in the library. She was watching him. When she pulled them out, she found the gun lying there, where Professor Plum had left it. She pushed the gun into her apron pocket, replaced the books, and hurried out of the room. But Mrs. White had put the books back upside down. She knew that Mr. Body kept the bullets in the desk drawer in his study, so she helped herself, leaving her fingerprints on the box as she did so. After dinner, Mrs. White was alone in the kitchen. She was just about to leave when Mr. Body walked in. He wanted her to make coffee for him. She waited until the right moment, and then she drew the gun. Mr. Body's cup shattered on the floor. Mrs. White cleaned up as best she could. She threw the cloth and the cup into the kitchen waste bin, but she was in such a hurry that she missed a few fragments of the cup. She knew that she had to get rid of the gun, so Mrs. White slipped into the billiard room and hid it in the little drawer where Mr. Body kept the chalk for the cues.
And that is how Mr. Body met his end. Why not come back and try to solve the next murder mystery at Arlington Hall?
Thank you so much, Butler. Alright, so that is the game of Clue, and that is all 3 cases that we solved so far, in novice mode to be exact. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, be kind to others, and have a blissful, wonderful day.